Washington, D.C. was wrapped in an unusual quiet that morning, a soft breeze sweeping through the trees, making the city feel more serene than it usually did. The military base, nestled on the outskirts of the city, was no different, save for the steady hum of activity in the background. It was a place of discipline and order, but also of camaraderie and deep bonds that tied people together in ways that civilian life never could. Emma Roberts, a 10-year-old girl with curly hair and eyes as bright as the sky on a summer's day, was sitting beside the fence, swinging her legs back and forth as she waited for her father. She had always loved visiting the base. It was where her father, Captain Daniel Roberts, worked with his military dog, Max, a strong, disciplined, Belgian Malinois who had been with her father through thick and thin. Emma and Max shared a bond that felt almost otherworldly, as if the dog could understand her emotions even before she voiced them. "Max!" Emma called out, giggling as the dog bounded toward her, ears flapping with every step. The dog had an energy that never seemed to wane, always alert, always ready to play. Max was a military hero, no doubt, having served with Captain Roberts in numerous missions, but to Emma, he was more than that, he was her best friend. She had lost count of how many times she had spent hours playing fetch, running around, or just sitting quietly next to him, reading a book. The dog was her protector, her confidant. "Hey, buddy, want to go for a walk?" Emma asked, her voice soft as she stroked Max's fur. Max responded with a quick bark and a wag of his tail, as if answering her without hesitation. "All right, let's go then." As Emma and Max began to walk around the base, the sounds of the busy base life echoed in the background, soldiers running drills, jeeps driving past, the steady hum of planes in the distance. Emma was used to it all. But today, as the breeze shifted and she looked up at the clear sky, she felt something she couldn't quite place. A subtle unease settled in her chest. "Max, do you feel that?" she whispered, looking down at him. Max stopped walking, his ears perking up. For a moment, he didn't move, his body frozen in place, eyes scanning the surroundings. Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had never seen Max this alert before, not even in the chaos of training sessions. He was always calm, always by her side. But today, something was different. "What is it, Max?" she asked softly, her voice tinged with concern. Max growled low in his throat, his body tense, his eyes now focused on something in the distance. Emma followed his gaze but saw nothing, just the sprawling fields and empty roads of the military base. She shook her head, trying to calm herself. "It's probably nothing." She tried to reassure herself, but the feeling lingered. Max, however, didn't budge. His gaze never left the distant corner of the base, where the shadows of the building stretched long in the afternoon light. After lunch, Emma returned to the base with her father, Captain Roberts. They walked through the courtyard as they made their way to the barracks. Emma's father was a tall, strong figure with a warm smile that made everyone around him feel at ease. Max, as always, was at his side, a quiet, loyal presence. Emma loved spending time with her father, hearing him talk about the soldiers he worked with and the missions he led. But today, her thoughts were elsewhere. She kept glancing over her shoulder, still unsettled by the strange feeling she had earlier. And then, she saw him, David Turner, a man she had seen around the base before but never paid much attention to. Turner wasn't a soldier, not anymore. He had been discharged some time ago, but no one ever talked about why. His presence always seemed to linger just out of reach, like a shadow that wouldn't let go. Emma noticed him standing near the entrance, watching them from a distance. His eyes were cold, unblinking, as though he were calculating every move they made. He wasn't looking at Captain Roberts or Max, he was staring at her. "Dad, who's that?" Emma asked, tugging at her father's sleeve. Captain Roberts glanced in the direction she pointed. His expression tightened. "That's David Turner," he said, his voice flat. "Stay close, Emma. I don't want you talking to him." "Why not?" Emma asked, her curiosity piqued. He's a former soldier. He's been acting strange lately. Just be careful. Emma nodded, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Turner had always seemed a bit off, but today, there was a certain intensity to his gaze that unsettled her even more. Later that evening, as the stars began to appear above, Emma sat in her room, sketching in her notebook. Max lay beside her bed, eyes half closed but still alert. Captain Roberts had left the house to attend a meeting at the base, leaving Emma and Max alone for the time being. A soft knock on the door interrupted her quiet thoughts. She opened it to find Sergeant Allen, one of her father's colleagues, standing in the doorway, a serious expression on his face. "Hey, Emma. Can I talk to you for a second?" he asked gently, stepping into the room. "What's wrong, Sergeant?" Emma asked, sensing the tension in his voice. Sergeant Allen sighed, looking over at Max, who immediately lifted his head, sensing something was amiss. "Your father asked me to keep an eye on you tonight. There's something you need to be aware of." "What is it?" Emma asked, standing up, her heart racing. "David Turner. He's been seen hanging around the base more frequently, and the men have reported that he's been asking about you." Sergeant Allen paused, his gaze serious. "Your dad's worried. We all are. Be careful, all right?" Emma felt a chill run down her spine, and Max stood up, his body tense, as if he sensed the seriousness of the conversation. She could hear her heart beating in her ears. "Don't worry, Sergeant. I'll be fine. Max is here." Emma smiled, trying to reassure him, though the uncertainty in her voice betrayed her. Max growled low, as if agreeing with her. Sergeant Allen gave her a sympathetic look. "Stay safe, Emma." He turned to leave, glancing at Max one last time before shutting the door quietly behind him. Emma looked at Max, his eyes meeting hers, and she realized that the feeling she had earlier wasn't just her imagination. Something was wrong. And David Turner was at the center of it all. The following morning, the unease that had settled in Emma's chest remained. It was a bright, crisp day at the military base, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something ominous was just around the corner. As she ate her breakfast, she kept glancing out the window, her thoughts lingering on David Turner and his strange behavior. Max, as if sensing her discomfort, sat beside her, his head resting on her knee. "It's going to be a quiet day, Max, don't worry," Emma whispered, though the words felt hollow even to her. She wanted to believe it, but the tension was too thick in the air. Max didn't move, his brown eyes locked on the door. Emma looked down at him, raising an eyebrow. "What's got you so focused?" she wondered aloud, but Max remained still, watching the world outside with unwavering attention. By midday, the base was buzzing with activity. Officers were prepping for routine drills, soldiers were on patrol, and the usual hum of military life continued. But when Emma and Max stepped outside, she felt the air shift. From across the courtyard, she saw him, David Turner. He stood near the fence, his posture stiff, eyes scanning the area. Emma felt her stomach tighten. Something about the way he lingered, watching her and Max, made her skin crawl. "Dad, who is that guy again?" Emma asked, trying to keep her voice steady as she stood next to Captain Roberts. He was talking to a fellow officer, but his eyes flicked toward Turner with a guarded expression. "That's Turner. I told you to stay away from him, Emma. Don't go near him." Captain Roberts' tone was serious, and his gaze darkened as he watched Turner. "He used to serve here, but he was discharged under questionable circumstances." Emma nodded but couldn't shake the feeling that Turner was up to something more than just lingering on the base. There was a hostility in the way he looked at her, and Max seemed to sense it too. The dog's muscles tensed as he growled softly, his gaze unwavering from Turner's figure. "Max," Emma whispered, "stay close, okay?" Max looked up at her, then back at Turner, his growl deepening. The protective instinct was palpable, and Emma felt a strange sense of calm. She trusted Max. If he sensed danger, there was something wrong. Later that afternoon, Captain Roberts was caught up in a meeting with senior officers, leaving Emma and Max to walk around the base alone. They often took these walks, enjoying the fresh air and the quiet of the surrounding woods. But today, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. She turned a corner by the base's perimeter fence, the path leading into the woods where she and Max often spent time. But as she walked, a figure stepped out from behind the trees, a man dressed in plain clothes. Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. It was David Turner. "Emma, we need to talk." Turner's voice was smooth but filled with something that felt almost predatory. His smile didn't reach his eyes, which were dark and cold. "What do you want?" Emma asked, standing her ground. She could feel Max's presence behind her, his body rigid with tension. Turner took a step closer, his eyes flicking to Max. "Just a little conversation, sweetheart. You don't need to be scared." "I'm not scared," Emma said, though she could feel her heartbeat quicken. Her instincts screamed at her to move, to get away from him. But she wasn't alone. Max was there, and she knew he would protect her. Max's low growl interrupted the silence between them. Turner's smile faltered slightly, but he didn't back down. "Max, sit," Emma commanded, her voice steady but filled with authority. She knew the dog wouldn't attack unless given the command, but his growl was enough to make Turner take a cautious step back. "Listen to your dog, Emma," Turner sneered. "But you and I both know, we're going to have to talk sooner or later. Your father owes me." Emma's pulse raced as she stepped backward, positioning herself between Turner and Max. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, you will," Turner said darkly. "Your father's not as clean as you think, sweetheart. I just need him to hear me out, and he'll be much more cooperative if he knows I have you." Emma's heart skipped a beat. Her mind raced. What did he mean by that? Before she could respond, Max lunged forward, barking furiously, his teeth bared. Turner recoiled, his eyes widening in surprise as the dog closed the distance between them in a flash. "Max! Sit!" Emma commanded, her voice loud and clear. Max immediately stopped, but his posture remained tense, his eyes locked on Turner. Emma could see the shock in Turner's face. He had expected fear from the dog, not resistance. "You think you can control me with that mutt?" Turner spat, stepping back slowly. "You don't know what you're dealing with, kid. I'm not finished yet." Emma took a step back as well, pulling Max closer to her. "Stay away from me." With a last glare, Turner turned and disappeared back into the trees, leaving Emma and Max standing there, both shaken but unharmed. Emma's hands were trembling, and she could feel her heart still pounding in her chest. "Max," she whispered, bending down to hug the dog's neck. "You're amazing." Max licked her face, his protective instincts calming as he nuzzled her hand. Emma returned to the base, her mind reeling from the encounter. She found her father just as he was finishing his meeting. His stern expression softened when he saw her, but he immediately noticed her pale face and the way she was clinging to Max's leash. "What happened?" Captain Roberts asked, kneeling down in front of her. "Are you okay?" Emma nodded but didn't speak immediately. She glanced at Max, who was still alert, watching the direction Turner had left. Finally, she looked at her father. "Dad, Turner," he said, "you owe him." Captain Roberts' face hardened. His eyes narrowed as he stood up. "I told you to stay away from him, Emma. And I mean it. Turner is dangerous, and his presence here is more than just coincidence." "What did he mean?" Emma asked, her voice small but insistent. Captain Roberts didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked down at Max, who was watching him intently. "It's a long story, Emma. One I've been trying to protect you from. But it looks like it's time to tell you everything. Emma's curiosity bloomed, but she didn't press him further. She could see the weight of the situation on his face, the burden of a past that had come rushing back. Just stay close, sweetheart. And keep Max with you. Captain Robert said, his voice thick with concern. The night that followed felt unnaturally still. Emma lay awake in her bed, staring at the ceiling, the events of the day replaying in her mind over and over again. She could still hear the chilling sound of David Turner's voice, his words echoing in her head. Your father owes me. Max was curled up at the foot of her bed, his usual spot, but tonight, Emma could feel the dog's unease. His body was tense, and his eyes darted around the room, as if searching for something that wasn't there. Max, what's wrong? She whispered softly, not expecting an answer but hoping that somehow, the dog would settle down. Max's ears perked up. His head snapped to the door, and his growl, low and menacing, filled the silence. Emma sat up, her heart pounding in her chest. Dad, she called softly, but there was no answer. She hesitated for a moment, wondering if she should wake her father, but something told her she shouldn't. The house was eerily quiet, and the darkness outside the window seemed to grow thicker. Max jumped up, his tail stiff, and without a moment's hesitation, he bolted to the door. Emma followed him, her heart racing. Max stood still at the threshold, his body coiled, ready to spring into action. Max? What's going on? Emma whispered, feeling the tension building in her chest. Then, she heard it, a faint noise coming from outside the house. Footsteps. Slow and deliberate. Emma's breath caught in her throat as the door creaked open, just a crack, allowing a thin beam of moonlight to spill into the hallway. Max growled low, stepping forward, but Emma held him back. Stay close, Max. Her voice was trembling, but Max, as always, didn't hesitate. The dog moved with quiet determination, ears upright and alert. Emma, despite her fear, felt a strange sense of calm in Max's presence. What are you doing here? She whispered, her voice just above a breath. The shadow outside the door shifted. Emma's heart pounded in her ears as she could just make out the faint outline of someone standing just beyond the door, their presence ominous in the stillness of the night. Max's growl deepened, and Emma instinctively stepped behind him, her small hand gripping the dog's fur tightly. The footsteps outside stopped, and then she heard a voice. It's me, Emma. Emma's blood ran cold at the familiar voice, David Turner. What do you want? Emma demanded, her voice shaking but trying to sound firm. Her mind raced. How did he know where we live? I just want to talk to you, sweetheart. Turner's voice was smooth, almost coaxing, but Emma could hear the underlying menace. I think you and I need to have a little conversation about your father's debts. Emma took a deep breath, her eyes darting around the room. She needed to get to her father. She knew Max could protect her, but she was terrified of what Turner might do. Stay away from me. Emma shouted, her voice trembling with fear, but she stood her ground. Max, sensing her distress, stepped forward, his body tense, ready to spring at the intruder. There was a long silence, and then Turner spoke again, but this time, his voice was different, filled with coldness. Your father won't be able to protect you forever, Emma. You can't hide from me. Without warning, Turner lunged at the door, but Max was faster. In an instant, the dog was at the door, his body colliding with the wood, his growls now a ferocious bark as he tried to push through. Max! No! Emma screamed, but the dog had already lunged again, teeth bared, fur bristling. There was a loud crash as the door splintered under Max's strength. Emma's heart raced as she pulled Max back. But it was too late. Turner was already in the hallway, stepping into the room. Max stood between Emma and Turner, his eyes locked on the intruder. His stance was firm, unwavering, protecting Emma with everything he had. Get away from her, Turner. Emma cried, her voice breaking as she stepped back. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't fight him. She couldn't stop him. Turner sneered, raising his hand as if to dismiss Max. "I don't have time for a dog, little girl." His eyes flicked to Emma, then back to Max, who continued to bark, growl, and show no sign of backing down. Max was undeterred. With a growl, he lunged at Turner, knocking him back. Turner staggered, but before he could recover, Max pinned him to the floor, his teeth inches from Turner's throat. Emma watched, wide-eyed and trembling. "Max, stay," she commanded, her voice shaky. Max's muscles tensed, but he held steady. He obeyed, his gaze still locked on Turner, warning him to make the wrong move. Emma could hear the steady, rhythmic pounding of her heart as she stood frozen in place. "I'll call my dad." "He's going to stop you, Turner," Emma said, trying to sound braver than she felt. But Turner wasn't listening. He was struggling beneath Max's powerful grip, his hands trying to push the dog away, but it was clear he couldn't overpower him. Emma's mind raced. What was Turner after? What was his connection to my dad? She realized that this had gone far beyond just a simple debt. Turner's obsession with her father was dangerous. Before Emma could do anything else, she heard the sound of footsteps outside the room. Her father was back. Captain Roberts rushed into the hallway, gun drawn, his face set in a grim expression. "Turner, I told you to stay away from my family." Captain Roberts barked. Turner looked up, his eyes full of rage. "Your family? You owe me, Roberts. You owe me everything." He pushed against Max, but the dog growled louder, pushing him back. "Get out of my house, Turner. You're done." Captain Roberts shouted, moving forward. Turner's eyes darted to Emma, then to Max, but with a final look of fury, he scrambled to his feet, backing away. "This isn't over, Roberts. You can't hide from me forever." He turned, disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. Emma's breath hitched in her chest as she watched him leave, her legs shaking. Max remained close, standing between her and the door, his eyes never leaving the spot where Turner had been. "Are you okay?" Captain Roberts asked softly, kneeling down to Emma's level. His hand gently touched her shoulder. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that. Max was here, though. He kept you safe." Emma nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Max saved me. He always does." She buried her face in the dog's fur, feeling the dog's warmth and strength, knowing that as long as Max was by her side, she wasn't alone. The morning after the confrontation with David Turner left a lingering sense of unease in the air. Emma couldn't stop replaying the events in her mind, her thoughts tangled with questions she didn't yet have answers to. Max, though steadfast as ever, had been unusually quiet since the encounter, his protective instinct still humming under the surface. Captain Daniel Roberts sat across from her at the kitchen table, his face drawn and tired. He was reviewing something on his phone, but Emma could see the worry etched on his features. Turner's threat wasn't just an empty one, it was part of something much larger, something that involved her father in ways she couldn't yet understand. "Dad, what's going on?" Emma asked, her voice hesitant but insistent. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this whole thing than just a disgruntled former soldier. Who is David Turner really? Why does he hate you so much? Captain Roberts put his phone down and looked at Emma, his eyes softening. "It's a long story, sweetheart. A very long one. And I should have told you sooner." Emma's heart raced. She had heard snippets of her father's past before, but never anything like this. There was something deep and troubling in his tone now, something that made her uneasy. But Max, who was sitting quietly beside Emma, seemed to sense that something was about to change. His ears flicked, his gaze never leaving the door as if he was waiting for something. "What happened?" Emma pressed, her voice more urgent now. Her father sighed, his expression shifting as he leaned forward, folding his arms on the table. "Years ago, before you were born, I was involved in a mission with Turner. We were in the same unit, working on a covert operation in the Middle East. Something went wrong, someone betrayed us, and Turner was left behind. We tried to pull him out, but it was too late." Emma's brow furrowed. "What happened to him?" "He went rogue." Her father's voice was heavy. "He blamed me for what happened. He said I should have done more to save him. But the truth is, Turner had already made choices that led to his own downfall. The mission was compromised long before I could act." Emma sat back, trying to process his words. Turner wasn't just some bitter ex-soldier, he was someone with a personal vendetta against her father, someone who had been scarred by the past in a way that Emma couldn't fully understand. But she knew one thing for certain: Turner wouldn't stop. Not until he got what he wanted. "What does he want from us now?" Emma asked softly. "I don't know," Captain Roberts admitted. "But I have a feeling he's not just after me anymore. He wants you, Emma." The weight of his words hit her like a ton of bricks. Max growled low at the mention of Turner's name, as if sensing the danger that loomed. Emma's heart sank, but she tried to steady herself. If Max was by her side, she had to be brave. "What are we going to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear building inside her. Her father stood, walking over to the window and looking out over the base. "We can't let him win, Emma." He paused for a moment, then turned back to her. "We're going to stop him. But we need to move quickly." Later that afternoon, Captain Roberts briefed his team. The military base was abuzz with activity, but there was a sense of urgency in the air that hadn't been there before. Roberts had already contacted the higher-ups, and the manhunt for Turner was officially underway. "Turner's not just a rogue soldier anymore," Captain Roberts said, addressing the officers around him. "He's involved in something bigger. A syndicate, criminal operations that he's been running for years, using his military connections to cover his tracks. And he's after Emma. He'll stop at nothing to get to her." Emma listened in silence, feeling the weight of her father's words. She glanced at Max, who was seated by her side, his eyes constantly scanning the room, aware of every movement. "We've got to find him first, before he makes his move." Captain Roberts continued, determination in his voice. "Max and I will head out tonight. We'll track Turner's last known location and see where he's hiding." Emma's eyes widened. "You're going after him? Alone?" "We're not alone. Max and I have always worked together. We'll be fine." Captain Roberts reassured her, but his eyes betrayed a hint of concern. "But it's dangerous," Emma protested, standing up from the table. "I want to help." Her father knelt in front of her. "Emma, this is too dangerous. Max and I are a team, Dad. You've always taught me that." Emma's voice was firm. "I can help you. I'm not afraid." Her father paused, studying her face. He saw the courage in her eyes, the same courage that had been there ever since she was a little girl. "All right, Emma. But you stay close. No matter what happens, you stay with Max. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, feeling a surge of determination rise within her. This wasn't just about protecting her father anymore. It was about protecting her family, and Max would be there, always by her side. That evening, Captain Roberts and Max set off on their mission to find Turner. Emma stayed behind at the base, but she was no longer sitting idly by. She was determined to help, even from a distance. The night was cold and quiet, the kind of silence that felt like something was about to break. Max's keen senses guided them through the winding roads and dense woods around the base, his nose constantly sniffing the air. Captain Roberts kept his eyes peeled for any signs of Turner's movements. "He's close," Captain Roberts muttered, scanning the dark landscape ahead. "I can feel it. Max, track him." Max immediately took the lead, his pace quickening as he moved with precision. It wasn't long before he stopped, his nose pointed at a nearby cabin. The hairs on the back of Captain Roberts' neck stood on end. Turner was here, hiding in plain sight. "Get ready, Max," Captain Roberts whispered, his hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. This was it. The final showdown. Max's eyes locked on the cabin, his body coiled and ready to spring into action. Captain Roberts signaled for Max to stay back as he crept closer to the door. He knew that this was the moment that could change everything, either they would capture Turner, or the chase would continue. With a deep breath, he stepped forward, his hand on the door. The silence of the night was broken by the sound of a distant engine. A car was approaching. The night hung heavy in the air as Captain Daniel Roberts and Max crept silently toward the cabin. The distant hum of a car engine was all that could be heard, growing louder as it approached. Time seemed to stretch on, each second hanging by a thread. Max's body was taut, his every muscle coiled as he sniffed the air, his keen senses alert to every sound, every movement. The bond between Max and Captain Roberts was undeniable. Max could sense his thoughts and knew exactly what needed to be done. Captain Roberts held his breath, the anticipation making his heart race. This was it. This was the moment where everything would change. They would either bring David Turner to justice or face the consequences of his rage-fueled vendetta. "Stay close, Max," Roberts muttered, his voice low but steady. Max's gaze never left the cabin door, his posture tense but composed. The moment of truth was approaching, and neither of them was about to back down. The engine's sound grew louder still, and then, finally, the car came into view. It was a sleek black sedan, the headlights cutting through the darkness. It slowed down and pulled into the driveway of the cabin. Turner was here, and the time for waiting was over. Captain Roberts motioned for Max to stay behind him, his hand resting gently on the dog's fur. "Let's go, Max. It's now or never." With a swift movement, they approached the cabin, staying low and silent. Max led the way, moving like a shadow, his body barely making a sound on the gravel path. Captain Roberts was right behind him, his eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of movement. They had to be quick and decisive. Inside the cabin, David Turner was standing by a table, a map spread out in front of him. His dark eyes were focused, and his hands moved methodically as he traced his finger along the edges of the map, likely planning his next move. He didn't notice the door creak open as Captain Roberts and Max slipped inside. Max's low growl broke the silence. Turner froze, his head snapping to the sound, his eyes widening in shock. "You again?" Turner sneered, his voice filled with disdain as he turned to face the two intruders. His hand instinctively went to his pocket, but before he could pull anything out, Max lunged. The dog's powerful body slammed into Turner, knocking him to the ground with a force that left him gasping for air. "Stay down," Captain Roberts shouted, his voice sharp with authority. Turner struggled beneath Max's weight, but the dog's grip was unyielding. Max's powerful jaws were inches from Turner's throat, a clear warning that he should not move a muscle. "I'm not done yet, Roberts," Turner hissed, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "You don't know what you've started. I'll make sure this ends, one way or another." But Captain Roberts wasn't listening. He took a step forward, his eyes hard with determination. "It ends now, Turner. You've hurt too many people. You'll hurt no one else." With a final, controlled movement, Captain Roberts pulled Turner's arms behind his back, handcuffing him with swift efficiency. Max growled once more, ensuring that Turner stayed in place. "You're done," Roberts said coldly. "It's over." Turner was taken into custody by military police, and his criminal syndicate was finally exposed. The intelligence gathered from his cabin led to the dismantling of an underground network that had operated right under the government's nose. Turner, desperate and broken, had underestimated the loyalty and resilience of Captain Roberts, Max, and the military team behind them. As the news of Turner's arrest spread, Emma felt a sense of relief flood over her. The tension that had weighed heavily on her shoulders for so long seemed to lift, and she could finally breathe again. The threat was over. David Turner was behind bars, and her family was safe. Max stood proudly by her side, his tail wagging slowly as he leaned against her. Emma smiled and reached down to pet him, grateful beyond words for everything he had done. "You did it, Max. You really did it," Emma whispered, her voice full of awe and affection. The dog looked up at her, his eyes filled with quiet understanding. Days passed, and the world began to settle into a new normal. Emma's life returned to its familiar rhythm, but the events of the past weeks had left their mark on her. She now knew just how strong she was, how strong her bond with Max was. They had faced fear and danger together, and they had come out stronger for it. Emma's father, Captain Roberts, continued his work, but now with a greater sense of peace. The weight of the past had been lifted, and the family could finally move forward, leaving the shadows of Turner's obsession behind them. Max, once again, was by Emma's side as they walked around the base. The bond between them was unbreakable, a reminder that true loyalty, love, and courage can overcome even the greatest of challenges. "What now, Max?" Emma asked, smiling as she scratched behind his ears. Max responded with a happy bark, as if to say, "Anything is possible, Emma. Anything." Captain Roberts looked at his daughter and the dog with pride. "You two make quite a team." Emma grinned, her heart full of gratitude for the loyalty and protection that Max had shown her. "We've always been a team, Dad. We always will be." As the sun set over the horizon, casting a golden light over the base, Emma, her father, and Max stood together, ready to face whatever the future might bring. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they knew they could conquer them, together. This story illustrates the incredible bond between a military dog and a child, demonstrating how loyalty and courage can defy even the most dangerous situations. It also highlights the importance of family, trust, and standing up for what is right, even when faced with overwhelming odds. The relationship between Max, the military dog, and Emma, a young girl, transcends mere companionship, showcasing how trust and protection can come from the most unexpected places. The story conveys a powerful message about loyalty, sacrifice, and the courage to fight for justice. It emphasizes that true heroes may not always wear capes or be human, they can be a dog, a child, or a person with unshakable integrity. Max's dedication to Emma and the lengths he goes to protect her prove that love and loyalty are the strongest forces in the face of adversity. Moreover, it encourages us to stand up against injustice and always choose the side of truth, no matter how difficult or dangerous the journey may seem. If you were moved by Max's loyalty and bravery, don't forget to like this video and share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think about Emma and Max's journey. Share the video with your friends and family who love heartwarming stories of courage and justice. Also, make sure to subscribe to our channel so you never miss out on more powerful stories that will inspire and touch your heart. Your likes, comments, and shares mean the world to us and motivate us to keep creating meaningful content for you. Every interaction is a step toward more incredible stories. A huge thank you for watching and supporting our channel. We appreciate every single one of you who takes the time to engage with our content. It's your feedback and encouragement that drives us to continue creating stories full of heart. Stay tuned for more emotional and inspiring stories, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care, and remember, sometimes, heroes come in unexpected forms.